Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck. They shot a woman in front of her toddler, then killed the child to silence her cries. And that was only one night. A twisted love affair turned into a killing spree fueled by obsession, fraud, and cold-blooded murder. In the late 1940s, Raymond seduced lonely women through dating ads. Martha, madly in love, abandoned her kids to help him. The couple would pose as siblings, gain the victim's trust, then rob and kill them. Their most horrific crime was against Delphine Downing and her daughter. After drugging Delphine, Raymond shot her in the head. When the little girl started crying, Martha drowned her in the tub. They confessed to 17 murders, though only 3 were confirmed. Executed side by side in 1951, Fernandez whispered, "I love you," before death. Martha once said, "What does it matter if you kill, as long as you're killing for love?" Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. They posed with rifles and cigars, then shot down a Texas sheriff execution style. The photos made headlines. The blood didn't stop. America saw glamour. Lawmen saw monsters, and the body count kept rising. In the early 1930s, Bonnie and Clyde rampaged across the South with the Barrow Gang. Their crimes included bank robberies, jailbreaks, and 13 brutal murders, many of them police. Clyde was a skilled driver and shooter. Bonnie often handled the planning. They survived shootouts, fled burning cars, and were nearly impossible to catch. But on May 23, 1934, police set a trap and riddled their car with over 100 bullets. Inside, Bonnie clutched her revolver. Both were dead before they could use it. The photos glamorized them, but behind the poses were cold executions, stolen lives, and a nation caught between myth and murder. Susan and Michael Bear Carson. She stabbed her roommate 13 times. He beat a hitchhiker with a frying pan and set him on fire, all in God's name. Meet the couple who believed they were on a divine mission to kill witches in California. Susan and Michael met in the late 70s and quickly spiraled into drug-fueled delusions. They renamed themselves Bear Carson and started their witch-hunting crusade. They murdered Susan's roommate, then a hitchhiker they claimed had witch eyes, and finally a man they killed in broad daylight on the side of a highway. Michael confessed casually in court. "We were doing God's work." Susan screamed, "Witch!" with a blank stare. They claimed they had more targets. The FBI feared they weren't bluffing. Carol M. Bundy and Doug Clark. He shot women in the head while they were giving him oral sex. She helped him hide the bodies and killed to keep him safe. They were the Sunset Strip killers, and their twisted fantasy turned Hollywood into a real-life horror movie. Doug Clark had dark fantasies. He wanted to kill women during sex. Carol Bundy, smitten and submissive, agreed to help. In 1980, they began picking up sex workers along LA's Sunset Strip. Clark would shoot them mid-act, sometimes keeping their heads as trophies. Bundy cleaned the mess, disposed of evidence, and later murdered her ex-lover Jack Murray when he threatened to expose them. What makes it worse? Clark took photos of the severed heads. Bundy eventually broke down and confessed. At trial, she said, "I thought if I helped him, he'd stop." He never did. Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. One claimed he killed over 600 people. The other likely murdered a 6-year-old boy and grinned about it. Together, they became a walking lie detector test, and still one of America's darkest mysteries. Lucas and Toole met in a soup kitchen in 1976 and bonded over shared depravity. They traveled across states, robbing, killing, and possibly eating their victims. Lucas boasted about hundreds of murders. Only a few were ever proven. Toole, meanwhile, confessed to killing Adam Walsh, a 6-year-old whose disappearance led to the creation of America's Most Wanted. Authorities later realized Lucas had lied about most of his confessions, but by then, they'd already closed hundreds of cases. Toole died in prison, likely responsible for far more than we'll ever know. Lucas? He was sentenced to death, but later had his sentence commuted. One question still haunts the FBI. How many of those stories were real? And how many were nightmares invented by 2 madmen? Inessa Tarverdyeva and Roman Podkopayev. She raised her daughter on murder. He shot a cop during a traffic stop. Their family photo had rifles, masks, and body bags. This wasn't a gang. This was mom, dad, and the kids on a killing spree across Russia. From 2007 to 2013, Inessa and Roman, along with their 2 daughters and extended family, formed the Gang of Amazons. Together, they murdered over 30 people, including entire families, sleeping children, and multiple police officers. They targeted homes and checkpoints, using inside tips from Roman's brother-in-law, a corrupt cop. Their victims were ambushed, tortured, and executed. One officer was gunned down while approaching their car. Another family was murdered in their own beds. They believed in survival of the fittest. Inessa called herself a modern Amazon. When the police finally caught them, their vehicle was filled with stolen weapons, jewelry, and bloody clothes, some belonging to a child. James Marlowe and Cynthia Kaufman. She strangled a woman with a shoelace while Marlowe watched and smiled. They murdered 4 women in a single month. Their spree was short but shockingly savage, and no one saw it coming. James Marlowe had just been released from prison in 1986 when he met Cynthia Kaufman. Within weeks, they were married and killing. Their victims were women, chosen at random, lured in with fake smiles, then brutally attacked. One was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and strangled with her own shoelace. Another was beaten until her jaw shattered, then killed in the desert. They used multiple aliases to stay ahead of police. By the time they were caught, 4 women were dead, and prosecutors believed the real count was higher. Kaufman became the first woman sentenced to death in California after the death penalty was reinstated. Jaroslav and Dana Stodolovi. They tied up an 82-year-old woman, robbed her, then suffocated her with a pillow. And that was just their first victim. For over a year, this Czech couple waged a silent war on the elderly, 8 dead before anyone even noticed. Between 01 and 02, Jaroslav and Dana pretended to be social workers or neighbors, tricking their way into homes of elderly retired citizens, often living alone. They'd bind their victims, ransack valuables, then finish with strangulation, suffocation, or blunt force trauma. One victim was found gagged and beaten, her house staged to look like a suicide. Police ruled it an accident. That mistake gave the couple confidence to keep going. Their final crime was their undoing. They lingered too long at the scene. Caught red-handed, they confessed to 8 murders. Jaroslav said, "It was easy, they never fought back." Dana just smiled. David and Catherine Burney. She held the flashlight while he raped them. They then took turns strangling their victims with a nylon cord, slowly, face to face. In just 5 weeks, 4 women were buried in shallow graves. One lived to tell the story. In 1986, David and Catherine Burney lured women into their Perth home with fake job offers or requests for help. Once inside, the victims were chained, gagged, and repeatedly assaulted. One was kept for days before they finally killed her, forcing her to write a goodbye note first. They buried her next to the others in bushland. The 5th woman fought back. Naked and handcuffed, she escaped through a window and ran to the police while the couple slept. David confessed, "Murder gave me gratification." Catherine, chillingly loyal, said she did it because she loved him. Samantha Baczynski and Patrick Selepak. They killed a pregnant woman, then her husband, then a man who gave them shelter, shooting him twice in the back. All within a single week, and that wasn't the end. In 2006, this Michigan couple went on a ruthless murder spree. Samantha and Patrick first broke into the home of Scott and Melissa Barrels. Melissa was 6 months pregnant. They tied the couple up, tortured them, and executed both, shooting Melissa in the head after forcing her to beg for her life. Days later, they killed Winfield Johnson, a good Samaritan who had offered them a place to stay. Patrick shot him in the back, execution style, when he discovered their crimes. Even in prison, Selepak remained violent, attempting to kill a fellow inmate years later. Baczynski claims she was manipulated. The jury didn't buy it. Both are serving life sentences. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. They raped Carla's 15-year-old sister, drugged her with animal tranquilizers, and filmed the abuse. That was their first victim. The next 2 girls weren't so lucky. Between 1990 and 1992, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka abducted teenagers, held them captive, and filmed hours of torture. One victim, Leslie Mahaffey, was kept blindfolded and chained in their basement for days. After repeated assaults, Paul strangled her with an electrical cord. Her body was dismembered with a circular saw and encased in concrete. Carla later claimed she was a victim, but the tapes told another story. She laughed, participated, gave suggestions. She served just 12 years. Paul received life. Carla remarried, had children, and now lives under a new name. Michel Fourniret and Monique Olivier. He was a convicted pedophile. She offered to help him lure young girls, as a gift. They buried the victims in their backyard. For 16 years, they hunted together, across France and Belgium, killing with method, calculation, and absolute cruelty. Michel, known as the Ogre of the Ardennes, met Monique through a prison pen pal program in the 1980s. He confessed his twisted fantasies. She replied, "I'll help you." And she did. Monique helped him lure at least 8 girls, sometimes posing as a kind woman offering a ride. Victims were buried under the woods or under sheds. One girl was murdered the day after her first communion. Another had her hair cut and stored as a souvenir. They avoided arrest for years until one survivor escaped and led police to them. Monique was calm during her confession. She said, "I did it to prove my love." Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate. He was 19. She was just 14. Together, they went on a 2-month killing spree, leaving 11 bodies across Nebraska and Wyoming. One of their first victims? Carol's own family. In 1958, Charles Starkweather murdered Carol's mother, stepfather, and baby half-sister in cold blood. Instead of running, Carol stayed with him. What followed was one of America's first modern killing sprees. The couple murdered random strangers, teenagers, and even an elderly man and his dog. They held people hostage in their own homes, sometimes for days, then executed them when done. Charles was caught after a high-speed chase. Carol claimed she was a hostage, but Starkweather insisted she was a willing partner. Charles was executed in 1959. Carol served 17 years and now lives a quiet life under a new name. Their killing spree inspired multiple films, including Natural Born Killers. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. They recorded a 10-year-old girl begging for her life, then buried her in the moors. The tape was played in court. Britain wept, and the nation never forgot. Between 1963 and 65, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered 5 children. Their victims ranged from 10 to 17. Myra often drove the getaway car or lured the children in, posing as a friendly woman in need of help. One boy was axed to death. A girl was tortured for hours as they recorded her screams. They buried their victims in Saddleworth Moor and kept photos at the grave sites, souvenirs for future visits. Both received life sentences. Hindley died in 2002. Brady followed in 2017. Fred and Rose West. They murdered their daughter, then cemented her beneath the kitchen. When police started digging, they found 9 more victims. Fred and Rose West turned 25 Cromwell Street into Britain's real-life house of horrors. From the 1970s to the 1990s, the Wests raped, tortured, and killed at least 12 girls, many of them underage. Some victims were their lodgers. Others were Fred's stepdaughters. Rose, known for her cruelty, helped tie them up. Some were sexually assaulted by both. Fred would strangle them or use blunt tools to finish the job. Then he buried the bodies in the cellar, under the bathroom tiles, or in the garden. Their own daughter, Heather, became a victim after threatening to go to the police. They joked she was under the patio. Frank hanged himself in prison. Rose is still alive, serving life. She has never shown remorse. And yet, some believe there are still bodies left undiscovered. If this gave you chills, there's more waiting. Hit that subscribe button and dive into our next video for more crime stories from around the world.